Welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus Podcast. I'm John, Father John Deere, and today I'm speaking with my friend Michael Nagler. This podcast is a project of www.beatitudecenter.org, where you can find many other podcasts and regular Zoom programs on the nonviolence of Jesus and practicing nonviolence and working for a more just, more nonviolent world. So as usual, I like to begin with a little prayer, so I invite the listeners, wherever you are, just to take a deep breath and just to relax and notice how you're feeling today and recenter yourself and enter into the presence of peace, the God of peace, or universal love, however you imagine your God who loves you. And we welcome the nonviolent Jesus here with us, and just take a moment to ask for whatever graces and blessings of peace and nonviolence we need. God of peace, thank you for all the blessings of peace and life and love that you give us. Be with us now as we reflect together on your call to practice nonviolence like the nonviolent Jesus. Inspire us, heal us, strengthen us, and send us out that we might be your holy peacemakers and practitioners of nonviolence, that we might do our part to help end poverty and war, racism, greed, injustice, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, and all forms of violence, that we might be the people you created us to be, your holy peacemakers. And we ask this in the name of peace, in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
So it's again my pleasure to welcome you, my friend Michael Nagler, who's Professor Emeritus of Classics and Comparative Literature at UC Berkeley. Michael co-founded the Peace and Conflict Studies program at UC Berkeley and the Metta Center for Nonviolence in 1983, and continues to dedicate his life to the values of nonviolence and spirituality and meditation. He's the co-host of Nonviolence Radio, a popular radio show and podcast on nonviolence, and his great books on nonviolence, such as The Search for a Nonviolent Future, A Promise of Peace for Ourselves, Our Families, and Our World, The Nonviolence Handbook, A Guide for Practical Action, Looking for Light, and The Third Harmony, Nonviolence and the New Story of Human Nature. Welcome, Michael Nagler, to my podcast.
Thank you so much, John. What an honor to be here.
Oh, it's
this
great.
Distinguished company.
Oh, yeah. It's great to be with you. So I would like to begin jumping right into the deep end and ask you to explain all things about nonviolence to us. You've been teaching this my whole life. I mean, in the 60s, you were studying this and teaching it. So what does it mean for you today, the word nonviolence? What are we talking about here? And you can take that in any way you want that would be most helpful for people listening today in the predicament we're facing today.
Well, I hope it will be most helpful for all those good people if I just kind of unburden it right out of my heart. I believe that nonviolence is both the deepest core of our human being and consequently also the destiny of the human race, and that all human progress has been a progress toward nonviolence. And that process, of course, this will be not a controversial assessment, that process is far from complete. But because it is, if I may use a Hindu term here, if this is our inner dharma, then there's a kind of health and happiness and security and fulfillment that it brings to discover that dharma and make any kind of contributions to it. And that can also be illustrated conversely by how destructive violence is, not just toward its victims, but as we are more and more aware now through the scientific category of moral injury, as we're more and more aware, violence is terribly destructive frame of mind and practice to carry out against others. Because really, 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 if you get right down to it, there are no others. We are all one. And injury toward what seems to us to be another person is actually injury to ourselves. So we have to kind of shudder for what is going to happen to the people who are working such immense violence in the world right now. But the main point is to discover our nonviolent capacity and work out how to implement that in the world. And there's one very important guideline that I have to remind myself about here, and that I'm going to lean on Thomas Merton for this one. Namely, it's our job to do it. It's not our job for it to work, to have the desired result. We have to create something, as Merton said, that God can make something out of. So that now, if I were to look upon that from my Hindu background, I would say this is our svadharma, our individual dharma that each of us has to discover how to do. I believe that mine is mostly an educational dharma, an educational path, and so far I haven't had any indication that that's a horrible mistake. So I'm staying on it for the time being.
Michael, that's so beautiful. I could listen to you for hours. You've been teaching it and studying it for decades, really your whole life. Let me put it to you this way. What new things have you learned about nonviolence over the years? Or has this always been the way you've seen it? Like this is fundamental to our nature? This is any progress is progress toward nonviolence on the whole human race, if you will. We're all headed to becoming nonviolent human beings and working for a nonviolent world. Because for me, I think I keep, every few years moving into deep levels of awareness. And maybe that means of my own violence. I don't know. What about you? Just in terms of your journey of understanding nonviolence.
Yeah, well, the fundamental understanding of it hasn't wavered. I just enjoy discovering it here and there in ways that I might not have expected. I'll just give you a kind of almost a comical example. I happen to have an amateur interest in paleoanthropology. Where we came from way back, and I mean, we all know where we came from originally, but on this planet, scientists have recently come up with a plausible explanation of why the Neanderthals went extinct. They were stronger than us and better adapted in many ways, and they had bigger brains. So what was the problem? And they recently recognized that you have these little pockets of small Neanderthal communities dotted all over Europe and Western Asia and up in Siberia. And on the surface of it, they're not too dissimilar from the early Homo sapiens communities, but there's one profound difference that in caves, for example, that were occupied by humans, Homo sapiens, in, let's say, France, you discover objects that were traded for and ideas and innovations that could have come from Siberia, or what is now Turkmenistan, or something like that. In other words, there were these very, very active trade networks which traded not only tools and weapons and the stuff of survival, but interconnectedness and communication of ideas. Whereas in the cave inhabited by Neanderthals, You might find some flint object that came from far away, but it never went anywhere, never became a whole culture. I guess to sum it up, Homo sapiens were sociable. They interbred, they exchanged ideas. We were, in a then remote sense, one community across the globe. Whereas the Neanderthals, however better they may have been adapted individually, were not sociable, relatively speaking. And this seems to be the reason why those poor brutes went extinct. And so far, we haven't done that, though we are, despite the fact that we're working on it very hard.
Mm. Thank you, Michael. I want to talk with you about Gandhi. And as you know, I've told you, one of my favorite books in the whole wide world is Gandhi the Man, The Story of His Transformation by Eknath Eswaran, which you were very involved in. You have a beautiful foreword to it. I remember in the 90s when I was the head of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, I think I bought 50 or 100 copies, and then I had Daniel Berrigan and our other priest friends buying copies, and we were just giving them out to all our friends. It's still one of my all-time favorite books. I'm holding it in my hand. Let me ask you first about Gandhi, and then I'm going to ask you about the book itself, because if you're listening, friends, I really do urge you to get this book, Gandhi the Man, which has beautiful pictures by the great Eknath Eswaran. Gandhi did so much for us all, bringing nonviolence to the whole world, lifting it up, drawing it out of all the religions, and then modeling it. And you've been teaching Gandhi for decades. What are some key aspects or lessons from Gandhi's nonviolence that might be helpful, or just to, lift them up for us to ponder?
Yeah, well, I would start, back at the point where that I have already mentioned, John, that in talking about nonviolence, we're talking about the inner core of what it means to be a human being. And then you look at every aspect of his life, which was incredibly consistent. And you notice, for example, let's take just for one thing, his attitude toward material goods. He was worth something like $5 in material possessions at the time of his assassination. His happiness came entirely from contributing to the happiness of others. And that was a very, very deep happiness that nothing can ever take away from us. And he exhibited that to an extraordinary degree. And I'm not the first one to compare in terms of his being and in terms of his impact on history. I wouldn't be the first one to compare Gandhi with Jesus.
Well, Dr. King certainly did over and over again, which
Of
was
course,
very
yes,
helpful,
exactly.
very helpful.
Yeah. So the difference being, of course, the vast difference in historical time, which allows us to see thoroughness and detail in the case of Gandhi, which is now closed to us in the case of Jesus. However, I do want to say, and I'm going out on a limb here, some people may be startled to hear this. They may not believe it, but it's in my heart, and I want to say it. And that is that it is possible to have a direct awareness of Jesus. I have not, of course, but I know stories from two Hindu sages, actually, whom tell nothing but the truth and would have no reason whatever to lie. And they're stories of how they not just met, but how they merged into the being of Jesus is like one of the most, it still raises hair on the back of my neck to think about it. It's stunning.
Well,
So how it, at the very, very least, it reaches across these artificial barriers between religions. But more than that, it's how we know for certainty that Jesus is a living force in this world, and he will pick any one of us up if we lighten the load.
Amen. Well, so Gandhi was very intentional about, going as he used to say the goal is self-realization, to see God face to face. And
Yes.
his whole life was the Bhagavad Gita and the Sermon on the Mount, which is what I
Hmm.
teach. And so you were part of this book with your great friend and teacher, Eknath Eswaran. And I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about him and the book. And now let me tell you why it gets me and why the book is so good. You'll forgive me, but I read the 100 complete works of Gandhi, and I've read about 50 biographies because I did my own anthology of Gandhi. And this is still my favorite book because, as you write in the foreword, well, this is what I'd love you to tell. Eknath he was from India, and then he ended up in UC Berkeley with you, I think. But, back in the day, he went and met with Gandhi for a week. He wanted to know where he got his power. And that's what the book says that's so different, that Gandhi's overflowing personality of
Hmm.
love and joy as he's
Yeah.
resisting the British Empire. Now, that's the way I think Jesus was. And everybody, you just want to be with this person because there's nobody like
Yeah.
him. And Gandhi was very intentional about that. And that's what Eknath's book was trying to get at. How do I share that? This is the contagious power to this person who tapped
Hmm.
into the personality of Jesus. And Gandhi insisted any one of us can do it. So tell me about Eknath and the experience of that book to get at Gandhi, and for ourselves, how we can
Yeah.
turn away all this violence and darkness and
Mm.
go deep into truth and universal love. We can do it, apparently.
We can do it. I've been working on it for decades, and it is working ever so slowly. And what it is meditation. And I think that in India, as far as we can tell, meditation has been practiced for millennia, and they've worked out the technology of how to do it. Now, in my case, the way it works is we take an inspirational passage, so be it, like the Beatitudes, which I often use. And when you sit in meditation, and what's important is to sit with your head and neck and body in a reasonably straight line. Doesn't matter if you're on the floor or in a chair or so forth. And then you have set aside some time for this every day. I do it a lot, but we don't need to get into that. And you close your eyes and go through the words of the passage as slowly as you can manage it without distractions creeping in. And but they will. And so when a distraction is pulling you away from the passage, the key is not to fight with it, because then you've just magnified it. So just refocus your attention back on that passage. And there's nothing unknown in the Christian fold or among Jewish meditators either, for that matter. I mean, Simon Weil has one of the best descriptions of how to meditate on the Lord's Prayer. Or, for example, let's say if we take St. Francis' prayer, God, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. You just go through those words as slowly as you can. Let the meaning sink in, but don't think about them. Don't worry, the meaning of those blessed words will register in your deeper consciousness. The slower you're able to say it, the deeper they will register. And that's the that's the essence of the technique. It turns us 180 degrees away from the frantic external material world that we're surrounded by, and it brings us in contact with very deep sources of compassion. One of the first aha experiences that I had meditating in the early days was I had some kind of a good experience. It was warm and reassuring. And simultaneously, I was aware that what I had just touched upon was in everyone. Indeed, in some form or other, in every living being. And that is what makes violence impossible. And so, to put it in one very simple, almost selfish way, if you're violent, it'll disrupt your meditation like crazy. But more importantly, in meditation, you will become intuitively, deeply aware of your unity with other beings, primarily other human beings. And there's also very good science on this now that wasn't there when I started, those many years ago. That from neuroscience and different angles, now that scientists have decided to take the blinders off and take a look at this stuff, there's excellent evidence, even from the external world, from the objective world. Though I don't need it anymore, it's reassuring to know that it's there and I can help use it with others. So that's the essence of the technique. Meditation has been otherwise known as interior prayer, is always a question of concentration. And while you're concentrating, you'd be very foolish to concentrate on something negative or something random. So you take something inspiring, like the prayer of St. Francis, and meditate on that and learn not to beat yourself up when you have distractions and so on and so forth. So that is the essence of the technique, and there's more information on it on the website www.ishwaran.org.
So
go ahead.
Well, and you've been teaching Gandhian nonviolence, if you will, and meditation, and you learned it a lot, I guess, from Eknath Eswaran, that website. And what the story you tell in your foreword to this great book is that, so Eknath Eswaran goes to where, Gandhi is at the height of his powers, leading his 300,000 people in prison, getting the British to leave India nonviolently, and he's going to go, how does he do it? And he gets there, and he's talking to Gandhi, and everybody loves him, and he's just this giant personality and this very poor person. And then he sees him meditate, and he goes, oh. And he said Gandhi changed in front of his eyes, and that's kind of the impression I get from Jesus. Would you conclude you can't be nonviolent, much less lead or participate in nonviolent revolution or survive really in this world today without meditation, number one? And number two, in particular, Eknath Eswaran was so moved, and why the book is such a unique story, that Gandhi meditated always on chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita and chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount. And this one verse, which he keeps returning to in your book, this is from the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 that Gandhi heard every single day, along with parts of the Sermon on the Mount. It's just two or three sentences. They are forever free who have broken out of the ego cage of I and mine, to be united with the Lord of love. This is the supreme state. Attain thou this and pass from death to immortality. So Gandhi's hearing that every single morning and every evening for the last 50 years of his life. The Lord of love, no more ego, and then he's hearing some of the Sermon on the Mount. Well, I think you'd become Gandhi if you were doing that every day. And that's kind of what you're saying. You have to, and you tap into oneness with all humanity and with God.
I mean, yes, let's not make any mistake. There's a vast degree quantitatively between what he achieved and what the likes of I have achieved. But I've taken a mini step on the same road, and it is there's something self-reinforcing about it, so reassuring about it, that you just know, like, for example, if you conversely, if you start getting angry, your mind is telling you, stop, I don't like this, I'm uncomfortable. Well, conversely, when you slow your mind down and concentrate on it, especially on a noble higher image like that, you get a sense of wellness that basically doesn't come from anything else. You can run around in life, you can, be charitable and good-hearted and get rewarded uh, with pheromones and everything that goes on in our neurophysiology. But there's something immediate and direct about the reward that happens when you are enabled to deepen your concentration. Not the rewarding part of it compensates for, but does not take away the fact that it is awfully hard work.
Mm. And you wrote a book called The Search for a Nonviolent Future, and that has always been a very important theme for me. I see it in the work of Jesus, where he's basically saying we're all blind and we need vision. And I see it in all the movements from the abolitionists to Gandhi to Dr. King. Literally, Dr. King, I have a dream, I have a vision.
Yeah.
And we have no vision today in this country, or no leaders who are. A real leader is a visionary, and that's why
right.
Dorothy Day talked about we're stuck with the blindest of the blind leading us all over the cliff, as opposed to what is our future. What we need are people saying the future is a nonviolent United States, a nonviolent Middle East, a nonviolent world, a nonviolent environment. Tell me then about your book and the importance of envisioning a nonviolent future and a nonviolent world, and how ordinary folk can do that. Instead of saying doom and gloom, but actually lifting up the vision and then working to make the impossible probable and then actual.
Wow. Well, this is so timely for you to bring that up, John, because we are now, as we speak, working on a new edition of Search for a Nonviolent Future. It has come into our hands from the original publisher, Barrett Kohler. The contract has, come to that point where the book is now ours, and we're designing a cover. We're going through it. I have to say, I read through it recently, and I honestly don't think I need to make any major revisions. The only thing that's different is an enormous amount of resources and organizations and movements and history and science that has come online.
Well, tell
Since that
people
book.
about the basic thesis there and your basic encouragements.
Well, I want to say that whatever is positive and true and good in human nature is real. And Gandhi was brilliant about this, using a quote from one of the scriptures that Sat, being or existence, also means good. And so it is only really the good that exists. And it is by definition available to every one of us. Yeah, so we're very happy that, when I say we folks at the Metta Center, we're a very, very nice team these days. We're very happy to have all of these resources that we've contributed. But there's also, as I was just mentioning, resources out there like the Global Nonviolent Action Database that's housed at Swarthmore, that has well over 1,200 episodes of nonviolence that have taken place in the last, I think a couple of hundred years. And those resources are priceless because we will get into arguments and people will say, yeah, but it never worked. And then you say, oh, really? What about the Rosenstrasse prison demonstration? And they would say, never heard of it. Because we have absolutely no nonviolence education in our
Well, what
culture.
was the Rosenstrasse nonviolence?
Well, this was at the end of February 1943. The entire Sixth Army of the Wehrmacht had just been defeated at Stalingrad. It was a very bad propaganda moment. And there were, at that point in time, about 6,000 men who were married to Jewish men who were married to Aryan wives, and they had not been arrested because of that Aryan connection, but they arrested them. And so they were all brought to the Jewish Community Center, former Jewish Community Center, number 12 Rosenstrasse in Berlin. Ironically, it means Rose Street. And they were, processing them to be sent to Auschwitz and wherever. But unexpectedly, shockingly, the women folk, the wives, the sisters, the daughters of these men showed up in the street. And the Gestapo came out and said, this is unlawful assembly, or whatever they said in German. And they said, we're not going. And they stayed there for the whole weekend. It's interesting to note that the Führer himself, Hitler, was paralyzed. He said, I will not make this decision. And he handed it down the line to other people. At the end of the weekend, those men were released. So this was a demonstration, not just a demonstration in the sense that they're waving a placard and saying, I don't like this, but a blockage, obstruction, and the willingness to do it unto death, which gives it tremendous power, coming from women, which gives it, again, tremendous power. And it shows that nonviolence worked brilliantly against Hitler when it was tried. So we ought to never again be caught in the situation of not having it on hand, not having the trained people, not having the techniques to mobilize it instantly when this kind of authoritarianism happens again. No names, please. No particular countries, of course, that I'm talking about here. But of course, nonviolence is much better developed now. We have institutions like Nonviolent Peace Force that are carrying out interventions. Really, there's about 20 organizations doing this kind of thing. And I think they're probably operating in probably about 60 countries around the world. I'm not sure about that. But what's happening is we're building up steadily a trained cadre of volunteers or, participants. They're not always required to volunteer, who are trained to go into conflict zones and defuse conflict without violence. And so we have the history, we have new institutions, we have the science, we have everything we need to really turn this around. What we have to go against is the cultural conditioning telling us the exact opposite of the truth.
Well, thank you so much for all your good work teaching nonviolence and reminding us. That is one of my favorite stories, and we could talk about so many others of the nonviolence resistance in Denmark and Bulgaria and Norway to Hitler. But as you say, what we need is all of us to do our homework now and to go out and organize now here in the U.S. and
Yes.
wherever we are in the world. And as Jesus to Gandhi to Dr. King and all the great peacemakers of history have taught us. Michael, is there anything else? We're out of time, but anything else you want to mention before we close?
Oh, I guess the last thing you said, John, makes me want to say that, just as King, in a moment of despair, actually heard Jesus tell him, "I will be with you," in a more remote way, unfortunately, because of our obtuseness. All of those greats are there as personalities in addition to all the resources. Yeah, and I suppose I should plug our website, the Metta Center, Metta with 2 T's, mettacenter.org, and our biweekly podcast is becoming very, very popular, and we would love to hear from you folks. What can we do for you? What stories would you like to contribute, and so forth. So,
that's great.
God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Michael Nagler, for speaking with me today. And yes, do check out mettacenter.org and all the good work that Michael and his team are doing. So thank you, friends, so much for listening to this edition of the Nonviolent Jesus Podcast. You can hear more podcasts and find other upcoming Zoom programs at beatitudecenter.org. Please consider offering a donation to support this free work, and if you can, leave some positive feedback or review at NCR or Apple or Spotify or whatever platform you use. And mainly, please just help tell your friends about this podcast and spread the good word. So may the God of peace bless you all and keep on following the Nonviolent Jesus. See you next time.